I wanted to do something um, about the cross, and I didn't want to just read the same scriptures over and over and whatnot. So hopefully, um, I have some history, and I have one of the major um, differences between um, the Aramaic and the traditional. And so here we go. Okay, so we're cool. Here we go. Before we actually talk about the cross and get to the cross, like last week, I wanted to go back to Jesus and how Jesus um, must have felt, and remembering that Jesus was a human being just like us. And so I mean, he experienced emotions like we do, emotions, pain, and all of that. Uh, he experienced it just like we do. And so I wanted to read, um, okay, Matthew 26:37 to 39. And of course, this is Jesus. Okay.
And he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee and began to be sorrowful and depressed. He said to them, my soul is sorrowful, even to death. Wait for me here and watch with me. And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me, but let it be not as I will, but as thou wilt. He went away again the second time and prayed and said, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass, and if I must drink it, let it be according to thy will. He came again and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time and said the same words.
Okay. Now, as I said, I put this in here because um, you know that um, traditional Christianity has turned around and said that Jesus is God. Well, the thing about that is, if he was God, he wouldn't be experiencing things like a man. And um, so we saw where. Let me just back up here. Okay, he became sorrowful and depressed. Now, um, if you he knew that he was gonna have to go to the cross and whatnot, but like we are, he really didn't want to. I mean, he was in horrid shape. So what did he do? He prayed. Okay. And he asked his father if he would let this cup pass from me, which means, if he would, he asked his father if he could not maybe do this and go to the cross and whatnot. Um, and there's some things here, and the other reason that I wanted to do this is if if you look at this, okay, um, and we look at the message of the kingdom, which is the counsel, the counsel of God. Okay. Um, Listen to the counsel of God. And and so part of the lesson here is, okay, you're going to approach God, but when you get the answer that no, um, no, you can't do that. In this case, um, God just clearly said, no, you got to do this. Well, and he had to do it so that he could show that he could show the world that you could die physically, okay, but you would live. That and that was part of the message too. So I wanted to put this in here, and also so that we could sort of feel what Jesus was going through. And his emotions and whatnot are just like we would have. And that, of course, is not taught. I mean, so anyway, that's why I wanted to do that. All right. And Je and Jesus was actually demonstrating the kingdom also, because that's what you do if um, you turn to God. We talk about turning to God. Well, praying. He prayed, and he was wrestling with this thing just like we do. But sometimes the answer is just not what we want. In this case, um, it was death on the cross, but for us, it could be anything. Okay, is this what I want or whatnot? And it clearly could go in the direction of, you know, um, maybe you're so ill, maybe you're supposed to die. I don't know. But anyway, that's why I wanted to do this first. Now, all right. And I pulled this one out. I pulled this verse out because I just, for myself, I wanted to go back through this to give me more understanding and to give you all some understanding, even though it's pretty obvious. But okay, Matthew 26:41.
Awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is ready, but the body is weak.
Okay. Now, and again, I am reading some of these things directly from the commentaries because they're good. Okay. Jesus, during his prayer in Gethsemane, was passing through another temptation, more severe than in the Judean desert. In the desert, Jesus' body was craving food. In Gethsemane, his body was fighting for survival. Jesus, as a human being, wanted to live naturally. I mean, that's the way we would all be. His body was protesting and was unwilling to die. His mind was tormented with the thoughts of death. Why should he die? I mean, this is what was going through his mind. What could his death accomplish? Why should he suffer the shameful and agonizing death of a malefactor? Just to mention something here, um, and I think we've talked about this, that Jesus died as a criminal. Okay. And so, anyway, this is what was going through, and this is what he was fighting. But he kept turning to God and praying. But his spirit, the Christ in him, was willing, prepared, and ready to pass through the ordeal of crucifixion so that he could demonstrate that life is eternal and indestructible. He would win a victory over death and the grave. And so we're starting to get the meaning of the cross. Uh, his spirit was willing because the cross was the only way to awaken humankind, to end violence, to change hatred for love, to relinquish former lifestyles for a new way of living, and to open the hearts of men and women to the principles of God's kingdom. So his body was saying, no, 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 no. What? His spirit, after having prayed to God, his spirit said, yes, you got to go to the cross. Okay. A human being in physical form is earthly and loves the things of the earth and the world. But the spirit also dwells in human beings and is constantly guiding if individuals will heed the prompting of the divine spirit. The body may protest, but the spirit is always ready to do the divine will. It was difficult for Jesus to surrender his life forces because life is the most precious thing in this world. Now, we're going to look at some cultural things and some history. Um, the cross is one of the oldest and most universal symbols in human history, used across numerous cultures and religions long before the birth of Christianity. In pagan or pre-Christian times, its meaning varied significantly depending on the region and context, often representing the sun, the elements, or life itself. Now, this is very interesting. The early Christians did not use the cross as an image of their religion. Why? Because crucifixion evoked the shameful death of a slave or criminal. And remember, once again, Jesus died a criminal. So early Christians, the cross was not symbolic of the religion or whatever. And then, okay, the first 200 years of the church, the cross was not a Christian symbol. Uh, and I found this interesting because the Christian symbol was actually a fish in reference to Christ's words in Matthew 4:19, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Now, I'm pretty sure we've all seen, I think I think I see it associated like with ministers and whatnot, the a fish, and I didn't have a picture, but anyway, but that's that's where I mean, this is before Jesus, of course, and so that's where it comes from. And crucifixion was the usual Roman manner of execution. Uh, According to Jewish law, criminals were executed by stoning, burning, decapitation, or strangulation. But Jesus was to be tried and convicted under Roman law as a political criminal, treason against Caesar. Okay. And Jesus was Galilean and therefore subject to Roman capital punishment. And when they say a political criminal, mostly it's because they, Jesus never said he was king of the Jews. but that's what became um, that's what became what they called him, the king of the Jews, and that's really what got him in trouble. But remember, it wasn't the Romans. It wasn't the Romans that um that arrested Jesus, and it wasn't it wasn't the Romans uh, that convicted him and whatnot. It was the Jewish authorities, basically, that convicted Jesus. And I guess what I'm trying to say is the Jewish people are the ones that wanted him arrested and convicted. They're the ones that brought Jesus to uh, the Romans, Pontius Pilate, and all that. So I just wanted to point that out. And um, the Romans, of course, had to carry it out. So that's kind of a little history there. Now, I don't know if you ever noticed that there are two, okay, there is a crucifix that you see here and a plain cross. All right. Now, the crucifix has the body, it has the Jesus as he was on the cross. But remember the early Christians then moved into the Roman Catholics, whatever, the Catholics, and that's where the the crucifix came in. But during the Reformation, Protestant churches rejected the use of the crucifix. In their view, it was a human invention, not in frequent use in the primitive church. They claimed the crucifix had become the object of idolatrous Catholic veneration and used other versions of a plain cross instead. So, and I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you're just going by a Catholic church, and they always they have cross on top, but the Catholic churches you will see the crucifix with Jesus on it. Uh, Protestant churches you do see a cross, but Jesus isn't on it. So I wasn't sure. Uh, I wasn't sure everybody knew that, but it I just find it interesting and thought I would put it out here. Okay, now there's one other thing um, that's interesting. Now you won't find it. You will not find it because in the Bible or basically a whole lot of other places because traditionally um, Jesus Jesus well some people even say that he was naked, but we see pictures when he has a loincloth. However, Jesus was crucified with the garments on. And why was this so? Because uh, even though even though this was a Roman crucifixion, all right, remember the Jewish people in Jerusalem, um, they played ball with the Romans, and so the Jewish people were allowed to carry out their uh, quote system, their government, uh, and their religion, so to speak. Remember, religion and government were the same for the Jews. Anyway, so Jewish people would not allow nudity. And when you read the Bible, you can understand and clearly see nudity was not allowed. So this is the only picture I have ever found, just to, just to show. And he probably just had the undergarment that they all had, but um, but he was not nude. So, all right, now, oh, wait a minute, I'm out of order here. All right, so our next topic, and it's one that is coming from Aramaic. It's another thing that another interpretation, uh, and this one is basically based on the uh, the Aramaic words involved and how they were translated. So our question is going to be, did God forsake Jesus on the cross? Matthew 27:45 through 50.
Now, from the sixth hour, there was darkness over all the land until the ninth hour. And about the ninth hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice and said, Eli, Eli, Lamana Shakbathani, my God, for this I was spared. Some of the men who were standing by, when they heard it, said, This man has called for Elijah. And immediately one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it him to drink. But the rest said, Wait, let us see if Elijah will come to save him. Jesus again cried out with a loud voice and gave up his spirit.
Okay. Now, um, I'm going to go here first. All right. Now we just read the Lamsa translation. Okay. And the Lamsa translation reads, my God, for this I was spared. Or uh, just as another way of putting it, for this was my destiny. Okay. Now, notice the difference here with the King James. And about the ninth hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, El, El, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Note the question mark here, but in the Lamsa, it's an exclamation point. All right. And I don't need to read the mark. It's just in here. Uh, Same thing. So so let's kind of get into detail here um, because it's major differences. Okay, I'm going to go like this. All right, so I have here um, the Aramaic, the way it looks in Aramaic. Okay, and then I just sort of, okay, we have my God, and remember, um, Aramaic reads right to left, not left to right like English. So, my God, for what a purpose you have spared me. Now, okay, we've talked about classical Aramaic and words before. And in this case, this kind of helps to distinguish why, why it's different based on the translation of these words. Now, so mainly what we're talking about. Uh, when George read it, okay, the it says Shabakdani, okay. Now, this is just a little Aramaic stuff here. Um, and that really is what it is this word, okay. But as in most classical Aramaic things, one word can have many, many different meanings, and the translation depends on the context and the translator. And let's remember that Dr. Lamsa, he lived it, he spoke the languages. So anyway, so you'll just notice that it says Shabbatani in the Bible, but it's just a misuse of the word itself. The real word is shwakdan. Anyway, that's how it got. Somehow they used the meaning forgive, and then they turned it into a question, but it's really for what a purpose I was kept. Anyway, just a little information about Aramaic. So, did Jesus forsake Jesus on the cross? All right. Now, I'm doing the yes answer coming from traditional Christianity so that you'll have an idea how they compare. So, in traditional Christianity, they say that Jesus is actually quoting the opening line of Psalm 22 and using it to express his deep agony on the cross. He is suffering the penalty for our sin in our place. Okay, this is traditional Christianity. Um, and I will say, I don't have Psalm 22 here, but um, Psalm 22, it that is not what he was quoting, okay, but that's what has come out of it. Uh, so the penalty, again, this is traditional Christianity. And remember, Jesus died for the sins. The penalty for sin is death. And death includes two dimensions, physical and spiritual. Again, don't, this is not what we're teaching, but physical death is the separation of the spirit from the body. And although they have this in their doctrine, but spiritual death, they say, is a separation of the spirit from God. But well, I'll go on to okay, since Jesus was dying for our sin as our substitute, uh, they say he was experiencing the agony of separation from his Father. It was the agony of hell. All right, now, just you can remember this, but this is not, um, that's why they say yes. God forsook Jesus on the cross. All right, but um, no. Now, remember I talked about the question or the exclamation point. Now, if you think about this, all right, the question implies that Jesus did not understand what was happening to him. It also seems that Jesus felt that God had forsaken him. That's using the question mark. Jesus had accepted his destiny. Why would he question his Father? Jesus, of course, had a deep knowledge of his reason for living and dying. Now that's the difference between the question and the exclamation point. In his prayer in the garden, Jesus had overcome all his adverse bodily feelings and left the outcome to his Father. So why would he be saying, did God forsake Jesus on the cross? All right, his cry was a victorious one. God did not abandon him. Now, hold on, I want to go back here just a bit. Oh, so all right. I maybe should go into that more detail, but I will entertain your questions at the end if you have. But you see the main difference, um, and it fits uh, it fits with the overall uh, message of the kingdom. You know, God is a loving Father, and God is not going to abandon any of his children, no matter what they did or didn't do. But out of this, traditional Christianity has just complicated all this stuff. And anyway, all right. So now let's sorry about that. Okay, let's kind of just finalize this. All right. Jesus was to die on the cross so that he could reveal God's power over death and the grave. All through his life and ministry, he demonstrated God's power over sin and sickness. His message of the kingdom was all inclusive. Prostitutes, sinners, tax collectors, society's outcasts, and the sick flocked to him, finding comfort and healing in his joyful message of God's kingdom. Now he was about to endure the ordeal of crucifixion and death. But his death was also a part of his life, and he would show his Father's power in the midst of seeming defeat and failure. Uh, the Messiah, Christ, was to triumph over death. He inaugurated a new way of life, one of meekness, nonviolence, and loving kindness. The forces of non-resistance and meekness were soon to conquer the world without sword, arrow, and bow. Um, and unfortunately, that has not happened as we see what's going on in our world today. The cross would forever destroy the power of death and the grave, and that holds true. Therefore, Jesus was not afraid of death on the cross. All right. I thank you for your contributions. And uh, I just wanted to, before we go to discussion, I just wanted to say, I mean, we're not at the resurrection yet. And of course, that's when people say, well, there's victory over death, the cross, and resurrection. Um, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I was originally maybe not going to do Monday after Easter, but I am, and I kind of was shying away from the resurrection, but I have a different way of doing the resurrection rather than just reading, um, reading the scriptures. So if it's okay with you guys, we'll do next Monday night and do a little bit more about this, about Jesus not really dying. Okay. Um, it's um it's just kind of fascinating. And we'll do some historical, I say historical stuff, but on the resurrection, but we need to remember that Jesus, whenever we talk about resurrection, everybody says Jesus, we think about Jesus, but that wasn't the case. The resurrection was around uh, long before Jesus. So anyway,